It's the end of the game as we know it. Hey guys, this is Gamer. Welcome to what a lot of people would call the death of the Pokemon TCG, like round 2, I suppose. This game should have never gotten off the starting blocks considering the Rocket and Gym sets, but whatever, we're here now. Cosmic Eclipse. We're not super fans of this set, unfortunately. I think there's a lot of cool stuff in here, but most of it just hasn't worked out very well, so it's a bit of a shame. Yeah, this is the end of several eras, if you will, within the thing here. Of course, a lot of people think this is the end of the game as far as the stuff goes, and well, one card in particular is most of the ire for that. It is also the final set of our Sun and Moon block. So, end of Gen 7, that's one reasonable error. It's the end of Turn 1 supporters, this is the last set we're going to have them for, because Generation 8 and onwards has that rule change, we'll get to that later on. And it's the end of my personal involvement with the TCG until this series started, actually. This was the final set that I played, and I think there were two good reasons. It was like effectively rising costs of stuff, right? I couldn't really afford to keep like paying for more of the sets when I wasn't really playing that much, and also Sword and Shield rules were just kind of meh to me. I don't know. This set also kind of put me off in the long run. I have a couple of really cool things in this set that I love, but I also just despise the end game of this one. Between the control decks and the ADP stuff that we'll get to, I just really couldn't stand this one in the long run. So yeah, I kind of just stopped playing, which is unfortunate, but there we go. It is the biggest set to date, even bigger than the last one, because we do have a couple of very nice artwork stuff here that's the like progenitor to character rares that we'll find at the end of Gen 8. So that's kind of cool. And yeah, I think only Fusion Strike actually has more cards than this set so far from at time of recording. It's kind of insane, actually. Yeah, there's over 270 cards in here, and a lot of good stuff worth noting. So I actually do have the return of the interest pool. Unfortunately, our thing has kind of colored this a little bit, but we'll still talk about all the stuff anyway. Testing things have been not super good for it, I guess, in that aspect. We have a few promos in here as well. There's still a few Sun and Moon promos to come out after this, but for the most part we're kind of done here. We also have an introduction to the V and VMAX stuff. We're not going to be playing this time, there's no experimenting like there was with Snorlax GX, but the VMAXing, we'll talk about it properly next time, but Meow VMAX is kind of cute at the very least. Being an evolution, you can triple acceleration energy this if you want, and 200 damage, draw 3 cards, like, it's fine. 4 colorless energy makes it splashable. Not really going to be seeing play at the moment though, because it is weak to fighting. Not huge deal at the moment, but it's also Pikarom weakness, right? So it's something to keep in mind. The Sand Slash is something I think is actually like sort of good. I think it did see a little bit of play, but I just don't invest in it very much. Like, if it's active and gets damage, put 3 damage counters on the attacker is pretty good. Frost Breath is not particularly strong, unfortunately, but Spiky Storm GX is actually quite solid. Each of the opponent's Pokemon that has a damage counter on it takes 100 for wards of double colors. That's pretty good. The rest of it, there's a really cool Eevee with a Rhyhorn riding thing from Gen 6. Love the reference to that, even though we never really got much Rhyhorn riding, but whatever. And then there's the Armored Mewtwo. Is the only time this ever shows up, I think. The anime-specific armor that Giovanni used to absolutely wreck Gary in the show. That was pretty cool. So, yeah, it's neat. It's not a good card, but it's cool that it's there. I think Celebi was also like somewhat okay, but it gets outclassed by an item card in this set, mostly. Tag Hole is the card that eclipses this, but this can search for non-tag team stuff as well. So yeah, if you're using like evolution stuff for it, this is something that's worth considering. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's just go into the set, because yeah, there's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot of artwork appreciation stuff that could happen as well. But for the most part, I think they're all kind of referenced over here, so let's go to it. We're going to start with the trainers, because I have to pull a decent number of them aside here in order to talk about them as a collective, because for the finale set of tag teams, they actually introduced a new style of supporter here as well, which is the tag team supporter. So these are specific cards. They're in a little group, kind of like the Holon engine used to be, with the like Holon's Adventurer, and they've actually got their own search card in equivalent to Holon Transceiver in the Tag Call over here. So this item card lets you search for any 2 tag team cards, put them into the hand. This includes Pokemon, but also works with the supporter card stuff over here as well. So they have their own little dedicated bit where it's like, you can play a bunch of these and do some pretty good effects. The actual cards themselves will have a standard effect, and if you discard a number of cards, usually 1 or 2, you get a bonus effect as well. So we'll talk about this one later because this one's gross and I hate it, and it's like one of the reasons I stopped playing. But well, yeah, talk about the rest of them as we go. Cynthia Caitlin puts the supporter card except itself from your or anything that you discard with its effect back to the hand. So they learned from Lusamine, at the very least, you can't just loop Cynthia Caitlins and all the time. But this one acts as the draw power for this engine. If you discard a card from your hand when you play it, you draw 3 cards. You do have to do the top effect before the second effect here, so you take the supporter back and then you draw 3. Doesn't usually matter, but it is sometimes relevant because it means you can't dictate what supporter card you pull back based on your draws. So there is that. Guzmahala is the search engine for this this archetype thing over here. You search your deck for a Stadium card, which is kind of hard to do. Like, Stadium Nav is a thing, but, you know, that's on a coin flip, so hard search for a Stadium is kind of neat. But if you discard 2 cards from your hand when you play this, you also get a Pokemon tool and a Special Energy from the deck. Both of those are also kind of hard to search. Special Energy is literally unsearchable outside of this card. So this you would frequently see in tag team decks with 1 Special Energy, even if they never played one before, often Weakness Guard Energy, and you would actually search it with this as part of the effect. You go like Tag Call for your tag team and Guzmahala, and then Guzmahala searches for the Stadium you need, usually Giant Hearth or Viridian Forest, and you get your Pokemon tool. Stealthy Hood was pretty good normally for one particular problem card in the set. And you get your Weakness Guard or your Rainbow Energy or something like that. It's pretty good. Mallow and Lana is probably my favourite one of the lot. It's just a switch as the regular effect, but if you discard 2 cards when you play it, you also heal 120 damage from the Pokemon you move to the bench. That is a huge amount of damage to heal, and often takes the tag team from being 2-shot to being 3-shot. And if you get 3 attacks with a tag team, that is kind of intense, and yeah, I really like this one. It's got an excellent full art too, which I actually did spring the packs to buy, if you will, on the trading ladder, because it was just that good. I loved it. Misty Lorelei is usually what I would consider the weakest one, but it does have a specific place in control, unfortunately. You search your deck for up to 3 Water Energy cards, put them into the hand. This is strictly worse than Lady, but at least this one is searchable, so there is that. But when you play this card, if you discard 5 other cards from the hand, note this has to be before you get the search, you get to reuse a Water Pokemon's GX attack this turn, even if you've already used it. Obviously don't do this before you've used a GX attack, because it still flips the GX marker at that point, but this means that you can use a Keldeo's GX attack after you've used somebody else's one, or just use Keldeo's GX attack twice. We saw this with Zygarde, and it was kind of neat, but this can be on any Water Pokemon, which leads to it being used with Cold Crush GX on Articuno, unfortunately. But, you know, control is dumb. Who cares? Red and Blue, a bit of a deceitful one, this. This has been less successful than we would like so far. You search your deck for a GX Pokemon that evolves from one of your Pokemon, put it onto that card. It can't cheat evolution rules, that's important to note. But if you discard 2 other cards when you play this, you also get to accelerate 2 energy, basic energy specifically, from the deck to that Pokemon. So the main use for this would be for Dartbox, and Pepper has been trying his best to make this work. You evolve like a Weavile or a Silvally and accelerate 2 energy to the guy, and just go from there. Naganadel GX is another good one that you can use it with. You can evolve into the Dragon type one, so you've got a bit of a draw engine there as well. And specifically Weavile is the one we target with this most often, because if you have Weavile in play, your basic Dark Energy can be transferred any way you want, so you can accelerate 2 energy from deck whilst getting the Weavile out, then transfer it to your active attacker and do decent stuff from there. I think there's a few problems with the engine as a whole. We've just found that like it's less than the sum of its parts, but it's still really cool nonetheless. And then we have the Problem Child. This got banned when the Darkness Ablaze set actually came out. I don't think it was when it came out, but it was like not long afterwards. This thing is dumb. Below a Bryson Man discards the top 3 cards of both players' decks as its main effect, but if you discard 3 other cards when you play it, you also force both players down to 3 benched Pokemon as well. The opponent discards first for what it's worth. I don't know if that usually matters, but I guess you can influence your own decisions on that. Mostly this is just here for the first effect, because it is used as part of the Endless Loop engine in the control decks at the end of their long get to the bottom of the deck thing. Mill you out, control your top deck, they get to recur their resources all the time with Oranguru, and they never deck out themselves. It's really dumb, and I hate it. So yeah, this was like the final straw for that deck, really, and messed everything up big time. So I just completely despise it. Before we go to the rest of the trainers, there is one Pokemon I have to talk about here, because this is, again, one of the World Ender ones here. Arceus, Dialga, and Palkia. It is not completely innocuous at the start. It was still really strong in this first set, but it will get absolutely broken with Zacian V in the next set. So this is what people refer to as the end of games. However, I want to note historically that a lot of people missed this one, including top players of the game. There's one particular Dragon GX that was picked up instead, Reshiram as it's called, Reshiram and Zekrom, that everybody thought was the best card in the set, like hands down. Almost everyone, that is, including people like Azul. So even top Worlds players miss stuff like that. ADP is ridiculous, and I always knew this one was going to be broken because of the last part of Altered Creation GX. I just want to note, this was slept on a little bit at the start. 280 HP means that it survives all of the stuff that's targeting 270 right now, which is a lot of stuff, by the way. It's got a Metal, Water, Colorless attack for 150 Ultimate Ray, searches your deck for up to 3 basic energy, attaches them to your Pokemon in any way that you like. This is the reason I messed up in testing the first time we played Pikarom, because I assumed that Pikarom did the same thing. It does not. That's to one Pokemon. This lets you spread the energy out, which is ridiculous. However, the truly busted thing about this card is Altered Creation GX. For a Metal Energy, it makes all of your Pokemon do 30 more damage to the opponent's active before applying Weakness and Resistance for the rest of the game. But if you have a Water Energy on this thing as well as the Metal when you play this attack, you also take an additional prize each time you KO the active Pokemon. That is busted in any format. It doesn't matter. Like, extra prize stuff is always strong, but taking an extra prize for any of your Pokemon getting KOs as well as they do 30 damage extra, this card is dumb. It invalidates almost every single prize deck in the format because they give up 2 prizes now. They can't keep up with stuff like this. It makes tag teams give up 4 prizes, so like 1 Jirachi kill plus 1 tag team would be it. It makes Dedenne give up 3 prizes, and it's easy to gust down into the active in this set. We'll get into that later. And it accelerates energy from the deck too. Like, it does 180 effectively when you've done Altered Creation, and that's enough to KO a lot of the stuff like Blacephalon and whatnot. You have to basically play Choice Helmet or die in Blacephalon at this point. It's stupid. Utterly stupid. And there's no way of ridding yourself of this effect either, because even Channeler doesn't do anything. That's an effect on you. This is an effect on the person who played it, which is the opponent if you're up against this, so Channeler doesn't work. Don't play Channeler again if you've already Altered Creation now. That's very silly. So yeah, it's dumb, and this is one of the major reasons why this set is so poorly received. If this card was like slightly reworked or just didn't exist, I think this could have been a much more positive set overall. But there you go. Rest of the trainer cards. I did mention we have Gusting in the set. Great Catcher is that Gust. Discard 2 cards on your hand. gust up a GX or EX Pokemon. It is not future-proofed, unfortunately, so we do lose out to like the Pokemon V, which are coming out here. But this is still exceptionally powerful because the Dene stocks are up even further now, and all the tag team stuff that we're working with, tag call, etc., we can gust those up, and like they're much less safe on the bench now. So very, very cool card to have around. Just wish we had it slightly earlier. It probably would have made some of the previous formats a little bit more palatable. Lana's Fishing Rod is not particularly good, unfortunately, but it is one of the only ways ever of shuffling a Pokemon Tool card back from the discard pile, on an item that is. So you shuffle a Pokemon and a Pokemon Tool from the discard into the deck. It's item-based Pokemon recovery, woo! Except it's only one, so it's not strong enough to do what you want. Usually you need to get the basic and the evolution card back when you're doing these sorts of things. So not really good enough that aspect. However, in Malamar, or any sort of psychic deck that does the stuff that way, it's pretty good at recovering spell tag, so you can use it in that sort of deck. Maybe Giant Bomb if you play that too. So yeah, Lily's Pokédoll is another one of the reasons I hate this this set from a competitive aspect. This is Robo Substitute. Play it as a 30 HP basic. It can never give up prizes. If it's active, instead of discarding it, you put it to the bottom of the deck if you want to get rid of it. It can't retreat, blah blah blah, you know, usual sort of bit, which is kind of annoying. It can be affected by special conditions though, which is pretty funny. But yeah, you never give up prizes for it. If there was a way of repeating this and recurring it in a single prize deck, that would be broken, right? Because you just never give up prizes and the opponent can't gust your stuff up. Well, yeah, that is a thing that exists. There is a Florges deck that if you flip heads on the Florges, it puts an item from the discard pile to the top of the deck, and there's a source book we'll get into in a bit that just draws a card. So you can draw a card to draw the Pokédoll that you've just put back on top of the deck, get the Pokédoll into the active, and then you never lose at that point, right? Because you can never give up prizes because there's no gusting in the format. It's very stupid. So yeah, as long as you don't put GXs down, which the deck doesn't play, you'll be fine. And it's dumb, and I hate it again. So it's like, yeah, this set is really silly for some of the control-y, stall-y stuff it does. Clay is a very fun card. We'll be seeing this next set with Pepper's got an ADP Zacian deck lined up that plays this card because it's funny, and well, at least it'll be a funny way of seeing the deck. Discard the top 7 cards of your deck. If any of those are item cards, put it into the hand. So, kind of neat. It means the energy and Pokemon and stuff go into the discard. Any supporters as well, so that's kind of rough. But if you play enough item cards, and next set's got some really good ones for consistency, we'll be able to get a ton of stuff out of that, and it's pretty sweet, to be honest. So yeah, all like metal sources, energy switches and stuff next set for the ADP deck will be really cool. It's meant to work with the Excadrill in this set because that's what the character art is for. We'll talk about the Excadrill later on. Erica, I have no idea why it's in here. We're never going to see it. It's the same Erica that was in Gym Heroes, except now it's a supporter card. Each player can draw up to 3. You draw first. Don't know why you would give the opponent the cards that way. On a supporter card, this is useless. On an item card, this would be broken though. So, yeah. Lily's Full Force is an interesting card, to say the least. You draw 4 cards, so raw draw 4 on the supporter, that's actually really strong. But if you have 3 or more cards in your hand at the end of the turn, you have to shuffle from hand until you only have 2 left. Luckily, you do get to choose which ones you keep, so that's kind of neat. But it also just means that you've lost a bunch of cards out of your hand. That leaves you a little bit vulnerable to hand-ripping cards, like if the opponent's playing Jesse and James, you just lose the rest of your hand and you are very sad. This can be a kind of neat combo with the original Lily, because if you've not got a lot of cards in your hand, Lily's going to draw you a bunch, right? So you can sort of cycle between them, and that's kind of cool. But it's not really strong enough to manage that downside. There is a tag team Pokemon that needs to have this played in order to do its effect though, so we'll get into that later. The same thing can be said for End's Resolve. This, I am going to play this round because I have a funny deck with it, and if Pepper can make it work, there's another one that we'll see as well that should be kind of interesting. You discard the top 6 cards of your deck. If any of them are basic energy cards, you put all of them onto one of your benched Dragon Pokemon. So I use this to power up Arceus de Palkia faster than you would normally be able to, is the idea. The goal is to get Alter Creation on the first turn, not the second turn, because people were teching for it being on the second turn. You could actually prepare for that. This card is very destructive, to say the least. It's like Clay, but worse in some ways because you lose all the other cards, right? But it is energy acceleration in decks that actually really need it. Both the ADP and the Reshiram Zekrom, which is what this card is built for, actually really want that effect. Reshiram Zekrom's GX attack gets a bonus from using this in the turn, so there you go. Professor Oak's setup, fantastic card, dies as soon as the set goes. Arguably dies in this set too, because basically nothing uses it in the end. Search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon of different types, put them onto the bench. Really good, get 3 Pokemon out of the deck, that's Bridget, right? That's what we ended up using for stuff. It was super good. The different type stipulations sometimes messes things up, but Naganadel decks often can work with this quite well because they tend to pair with non-psychic stuff. Think even Weavile is pretty good. There's actually a second typing on Sneasel this set, so you can get 2 different Sneasel now, which is pretty great. And even Quagsire Naganadel is kind of cool for it, because you can get the Wooper of 2 different types, and like Naganadel can do stuff too. It's a really neat card, but the problem is that when you can't play it going first, it's useless. So next set it's going to die entirely. Roller Skater is not a good card, but we'll note it anyway. Discard a card from the hand, draw 2. If you discard an energy, draw 4 instead. Draw 4 is always good, but this kind of effect has never really seen that much play. I think Team... which one was it? Plasma Grunt was the only one that saw like any consideration, and even that card didn't really see very much. So yeah, not particularly good, unfortunately. Rosa is really neat. Just a little bit awkward to base your engine around, but it's really good for single prize stuff. If one of your Pokemon was KO'd during the opponent's last turn, you search your deck for a Pokemon, a trainer card of any kind, and a basic energy, put them into the hand. So this is often used in Stage 2 decks in order to get Rare Candy plus the Stage 2, after your Jirachi or something like that has been KO'd in the active, and you're off to the races. Very strong for the Gallade that's in this set. Sai did try the Empoleon as well, we'll talk about those as we go. Not quite as strong a deck, but still, this card is really fun, so there you go. Roxy is one of my favourite cards out of this set, to be honest. Discard up to 2 Pokemon that aren't GX or EX Pokemon, draw 3 for each one discarded this way. A little bit weird that it's not future-proof considering what's coming out next, but I guess that's never really been a thing, so whatever. Yeah, this is really good with its own archetype. There's a Coughing Wheezing in this set that we'll go into later, but it's good in any single prize deck, or later on the Pokemon B decks can use this too. To be able to just draw 6 is really solid. If you can search out Pokemon consistently from the deck otherwise, then being able to convert them to draws is really good. Just get further down into the deck for the other stuff that you really need. Will is a very funny card. There's a couple of synergy things you can do with this, and mostly dumb BS type stuff. If you flip a coin for an attack, an ability, or a trainer card during the rest of this turn, you can choose what the coin toss is, whether it's heads or tails. There's a couple of caveats here. It's like if you flip a coin, so if the opponent has to flip a coin for the effect of your attack, doesn't work. But this is often used with stuff like, say, Pokemon Catcher guarantees Gust effect for 2 cards. It could be used with Crushing Hammer to guarantee that you discard an energy. There's Xatu that we're not going to speak about in this set much, but if you flip heads on that, it drains the opponent to 10 HP remaining, so there's a funny deck you could do with that later, when you can also poison the opponent as well. Just dumb stuff like that. Anything you could think of that flips coin stuff is worth looking at with the Will supporter card. Chaotic Swell is probably one of my favourite stadiums of all time, and that might be a bit of a hot take because I know a lot of people don't like the effect this has. Whenever either player plays a stadium card from their hand, discard that stadium card after discarding this one. This basically just reads blank the opponent's stadium card for the turn, but it's more powerful than that in a way. Because if you play this to bounce one of the opponent's stadiums, they now have to play a second one in order to get rid of this. You can only play 1 stadium per turn, so the board is still open. If you can swell the next turn as well, then they're just burning stadium cards and they never get their effects off. I like this a lot because stadium cards are so ridiculously powerful in this era. Giant Hearth, Viridian Forest, the disruption ones like Power Plant, Wonder Lab, You know, Heat Factory is also ridiculous. Thunder Mountain is ridiculous. Like, every deck basically has got a broken stadium that they want to play. Ultra Space even, right? So many things with that. But, like, if you can work this in and stop the opponent from having the effects of those ridiculous stadium cards, yeah, you don't get any effects off it, but not every deck has to have the ridiculous effects of them. And some of them really get debilitated if something like Power Plant is in play. So having a way of counteracting that, I think, is pretty good for the game. So there you go. Beastite is an interesting tool card that makes the Ultra Beast it's attached to do 10 more damage to the opponent's active per prize card that you have taken. So pretty good. It makes your late game really strong with this stuff here. I don't know if it's really played that much. Beast Box is something you could always build at this time, and there are a couple of tools for it in this set, but I'm just not convinced on it in the end. It's meant to work with a Buzzwole in this set though. We'll talk about that later. Dragonium Z, the last of the Z crystals here, only 3 of them in existence. If you have Dragon Claw as one of your attacks, and there's a Dramper in this set that does, you pay 3 colorless energy, discard all the basic energy from this Pokemon, and do 80 damage for each one that you discarded this way. It is your Z move, obviously, so it is your GX attack. That's a bit of a shame in some aspects, because the best deck that would use it is probably ADP, and you can't do that because Alter Creation. But Destructive Drake is still pretty fun, and we can work with it there. Too bad there's not a water type that has Dragon Claw. That would be pretty neat, but doesn't exist, I don't think. Island Challenge Amulet is a problem child in Expanded. It got a whole deck archetype banned, which we don't really have time to go into. But it gives your GX or EX Pokemon 100 less HP, but it also makes them give up 1 fewer prize card if it is knocked out. So, just to very briefly speak on it, the problem child is Jirachi EX in the expanded format. That thing only has 90 HP, so when you equip this to it, it immediately gets KO'd, and only gives up 1 prize, but that's fine because it's mostly just used to search out Lieutenant Surge stuff and do some really dumb things that way. There's a way of reset stamping the opponent down to 1 card, and basically just winning the game on turn 1. It was really dumb. Finally, we have Draw Energy. I actually should note, this is actually used in Standard as well, though, because tag team decks will use this in order to force 3 tag teams through, which is pretty good. So even like Gardevoir Sylveon, yeah, it's down to 160 HP, but it only gives up 2 prizes, and it's still Gardevoir and Sylveon, still a really strong attacker. So, stuff like that. Finally, Draw Energy is a colorless energy, special energy, and it draws a card when you attach from hand to a Pokemon. So pretty good for the Porygon Z deck if you want to use that. Also pretty solid for decks that just have all colorless requirements. So yeah, it's pretty alright. Pokemon time! There's a lot of ones in here, so let's just go for it. Venusaur Snivy is an interesting tag team that we don't really see this round, but is used a little bit with Rillaboom in the next set. It's a 270 HP guy. If it's active and you attach a grass energy from hand to it, you gust up one of the opponent's Pokemon. That's the most interesting part of the card. It's alright. The rest of it, it's also alright. I mean, the attack name is hilarious, Forest Dump, right? Just imagine dumping an entire forest on someone. That should do more than 160 damage. Whatever, Grass Triple Colorless 160. Can't use Triple Acceleration Energy though, so rip to that. If we still had DCE, this would probably be decent. Solar Plant for 3 colorless energy does 50 to each of the opponent's Pokemon, but if this Pokemon has 5 energy attached to it, then you can full heal all of your Pokemon as well. Pretty solid, to be honest. 50 spread to everything is not awful. We have seen this kind of attack used before, so even as a GX attack, that's alright. I just don't know, because, yeah, the gusting effect is super good, but then you've got to, like, switch this in and out of the active, and it's also grass type, and fire is still pretty good, because they also get a good GXing here. Charizard was just eating good at this time. Charizard and Brazen! I'm going to call this a Brazen card, though, because it's, I mean, clearly, it's on the front of the card instead of Charizard's in the back. 270 HP, we will see this round because I do actually quite like this this version of the Greensard deck. For 3 fire and a colorless, Brilliant Flare does 180 damage, but then you search your deck for up to 3 cards and put them into the hand as well. So this effectively reads like Magical Ribbon, but it does damage as well. Crimson Flame Pillar for a single fire energy basically reads like Nitro Attack GX, so we're going right back to Guardian's Rising with this one. Attach 5 basic energy from your discard pile to your Pokemon in any way that you like. But if this has a second energy on it, you also burn and confuse the opponent. So kind of like Bursting Burn from Blacephalon. A lot of different things coming into this card to make one pretty solid package overall. The only downside to this card compared to Reshizard is that it can't attack for 3 energy. It has to hit for 4. But Brilliant Flare just lets you search double Custom Catcher as an obvious example. There's a ton of stuff you can do with it. Most of the competitive stuff I saw with this didn't actually play the disruption supporters and things as well, but it is very possible to do like Lieutenant Surge, Jesse James strategies and stuff with this as well if you want to. The main disruption thing was Omastar, because this lets you search for like the fossil and rare candy and Omastar, so you can get stuff going with that. Item locking is pretty strong after all, and this deck does not need a good bench size. It only needs like 2 Pokemon, so yeah. The last of the starters, Blastoise and Piplup over here. It's another 270 HP guy. It's probably one of the better water type stuff that we've had, mostly paired with ADP, I think. Pepper tried this with Silvalite Quagsire and it really just didn't work. Splash Maker for 2 water and a Colorless energy does 150 damage. Can attach up to 3 water energy from the hand to the Pokemon in any way that you like. So Misty Lorelei, I guess, would be the thing for this. And if you do that, for each Pokemon you attached to, you heal 50 damage. For each card that you attach to them. So if you attach to 1 Blastoise Piplup, 3 water energy, you're going to heal it for 150. Pretty good. Bubble Launcher for 2 water and the colors does 100 and auto paralyzes, so Ice Beam GX basically. But if you have 6 water energy on this thing, it does 250 damage instead. Kind of weird to be honest, but I guess it sort of works within the Quagsire moniker, because like if you can just fuel all of the energy up to the first guy, 250 is like a reasonable number, but it's not a KO number. So unlike Pikarom and specifically Raichu, because that's also 250, there's not really any way of scaling this to KO attack team. So don't know if I really appreciate that. There is a 70 HP Nuzlocke Pikachu here to go with the 60 HP one we had before. I think the 70 HP one is obviously better in most cases, but if you play Elm's Lecture, you'll still want the 60 HP one. It goes into my favorite card of the set, and one of my favorite decks of all time, the Nuzzle Raichu. 120 HP to retreat is annoying, to be honest, but usually don't retreat this when it's active, so I guess that's fine. It has Nuzzle, which is really good for the engine, and Powerful Spark is the same thing as what was on the GX, but this one costs 1 lightning to get going. 20 damage times the number of lightning on all of your Pokemon. Since we have had like the Nuzzle deck sort of come up before, let's just briefly go up the pieces. The Emolga is a 0 retreat 60 HP one that lets you search for a Pokemon with Nuzzle and put it into the hand once per turn per Emolga. The Pachirisu accelerates for 1 lightning energy. It accelerates an energy, lightning from the deck, to each of your bench Pokemon with Nuzzle, so you can get up to 5 energy in play per turn. There's a Dedenne that for each Nuzzle Pokemon you have does 10 snipe damage for 1 lightning. And of course now we have the Pikachu Raichu as well. So the reason this is such a big deal is that you can now use Emolga to search for the Raichu, and so you can search your evolution out as well. The entire engine does take a couple of turns to set up, but it's all single prize, so you can often make the comeback versus multi-prize decks, and it is very possible to hit over 280 damage with this thing. So yeah, between Electro Power and the potential of like Roxy spreads and stuff, you can just KO everything once this sets up. It's very, very fun. The Baby Trio, Togepi, Cleffa, Igglybuff, it's a Fairy type 240 HP thing. Its attack is pretty bad, 2 Fairy and a Colorless to do 120, and if you flip heads until tails, 30 more damage, so like flip until tails, do 30 more for each heads. Very bad attack, to be honest. Supreme Puff is what it's supposed to be used for. For 2 Fairy energy, take an extra turn. Doesn't do any damage, but take an extra turn is pretty strong. The idea, though, is that you're supposed to use this with its bonus effect. That bonus effect, though, requires you to have 16 Fairy energy on this thing. Not even Hat Ladies is getting this to work. If you manage to get that bonus effect to happen somehow, Well, the opponent's probably not a very good player, but also you get to shuffle all of their bench Pokemon and all cards attached to them back into the deck. The idea then is that you're able to knock out their active with this and just win the game before they get to move again. It's never going to happen though, because 16 energy in the deck is already pushing it, but 16 energy on the same guy is never a thing that's going to come up. So yeah. Vulpix is kind of neat, because if it's on the bench it just doesn't take damage from attacks. If you want to play the Alolan Ninetales to search out items, that's still a thing, or, you know, GX prevention stuff is kind of fun. And it has a pretty funky deck to play here. We haven't even experimented with this one, to be honest, because it's just a little bit too below the curve. But the fairy typing is at least interesting because of the weakness aspect here. Alolan Ninetales for 0 energy does 10 damage for each Pokemon tool in your discard pile. You might remember, if you've paid and watched any of this stuff before, that there's a bunch of Rotom forms in the format too, which if you have 9 or more tools in the discard pile, can attack for 0 energy. So this whole deck can play no energy and works out fine enough. The problem, of course, is that 10 damage per tool is basically nothing. In order to get this to scale high up enough, you need like 18 tools in the discard, probably more than that. That's like a third of your deck. Good luck with that. But the Rotoms are kind of neat in their own right. You can hit a bunch of different weaknesses, have a few different cool effects to it, so yeah. Mega Lopunny Jigglypuff, one of the best cards in the set. For 3 colorless energy, that's 240 HP, colorless tag team, lets you do 60, plus 60 for each GX and EX Pokemon the opponent has in play. Obviously not future-proof for the Pokemon V, but they probably didn't want that sort of thing immediately. I'm okay with that as a stipulation. It's really strong for this set though, because most of the best decks are tag team based and also Dedenne based, so you can easily do 240 plus damage with this thing for any free energy. Welder plus attach, pretty good. Use it in Pikarom potentially to with the Tapu Koko and stuff, or Full Blitz, pretty good. Use it in Gardevoir Sylveon because you can use Fairy Song and Kaleidostorm to get to it, pretty good. Puffy Smashes for 1 single colorless energy as the GX attack puts the opponent to sleep, which is really bad, but if you have 5 energy on this thing, it snipes 200 as well, which is really nice. This can potentially force the opponent to play Mew down, because otherwise, even in a non-sniping deck, it's like, well, if you don't, then I'm going to KO your support mon on the bench, and you're going to suffer for it. Or I just KO Dedenne and win the game. That also works. So, yeah, and the sleep disruption sometimes is relevant. You're probably not going to see Slumbering Forest with this thing, but it's funny, and it's also only got 1 retreat, so it's a very mobile tag team as well. Most of them are super big, so that's nice. Vileplume, it's a fun deck. It didn't quite work out, but maybe with Rillaboom we could possibly do something. Who knows? 240 HP, it lets you once per turn heal 30 from each of your Pokemon per Vileplume. It's a soft once per turn. Its attack for Grass and Colors does 180, but it does 10 less for each damage counter on this Pokemon. And its GX attack for a single Grass energy does 50, but it leaves the opponent burned, paralyzed, and poisoned. So the full gamut of the best statuses that you can inflict. That's pretty solid, to be fair. Auto Paralysis is obviously very fun. It effectively does 80 damage to the opponent because they get damaged by the burn and the poison. Pretty neat. The one sort of catch with this in the end, it is like a tanking sort of deck. You can play with this. There's a Leavanny that lets you take 40 less damage on your grass Pokemon, and if you have enough of these in play, plus the sort of heals from like maybe a Pokemon Center Lady or Great Potion and Gardenia, stuff like that, you can heal ridiculous amounts of damage. There's even Rowlet and Alolan Executor that for 0 energy just evolves from Oddish to Vileplume from deck, which is pretty good. But the only problem, apart from being fire weak, the main problem is just getting enough of the stuff out. Like, the deck is just too inconsistent, at least the way that we have it at the moment. There's probably a way of doing it, but it's a bit awkward, so yeah. Too bad. Alolan Persian is a bastard of a Pokemon. It really has a smug face, like both physically and literally. It prevents all effects of attacks, including damage done to this Pokemon by tag teams, Ultra Beasts, and Pokemon with special energy attached. Thanks to Guzma Hala, that last one's actually somewhat relevant too. And yeah, it's really annoying. Both of its attacks do a Dark Double Colors to do 120. The Claw Slash, the main one, is just to the active. Stalking Claws does it to one of the opponent's Pokemon in general, and isn't affected by any effects on that Pokemon. So you can snipe the bench, but you could also punch through an opponent's smug face with your Stalking Claws. So there you go. Very silly, it's only got 200 HP, so it's not super good, but there is a good Alolan Meowth in the format that's like if you go second and it's your first turn, does 70 damage for 0 energy. That's pretty neat. Magneton is a dumb, control, stupid bum, and I don't like him. If he is anywhere, it doesn't even have to be on the bench, you can search your deck for up to 3 supporter cards, put them into the hand, and then KO the Magneton. Why the Magnemite gets the Lieutenant Surge art instead of this one, I don't know, but this effectively reads search Lieutenant Surge and the 2 supporters that you want to use with it, then KO it. It's very much like the Mismagius, but it trades the ability to have Duskstone for the ability to guarantee the supporter cards that you want. So you can guarantee having like Beloved Bryson Man and Jesse James and the way of playing them. It's dumb and I hate it, and there you go. I guess if you play Magnezone you would probably play this one, but like good luck with that. Steelix is a very funny deck. For 2 colors energy, this thing does 50 for each Pokemon you discard with a retreat cost of exactly 4. Of course, the Onix and the Steelix have that retreat cost. There's the Licky Licky line, I think, is the main thing you play with it, that also has that. They have their own dedicated supporter searcher in the Pokemaniac. So, it's funny. There's a deck for it. It's got character art too, so it's pretty neat. But, yeah, very dumb card. Coughing and Wheezing both have the same effect, where if you discard them via Roxy, you put a damage counter on each of the opponent's Pokemon. So if you can discard 2, then you will put 2 damage counters on for that single Roxy, as well as drawing 6 cards. That's pretty good. If you can afford it, you play the Wheezing before the Coughing. If you need more Wheezings, basically, you play the Coughing too. This is because you can't start with Wheezing, but you can start with Coughing, and its attack is useless. So, yeah. Coughing, this one though, does have 1 retreat, which is worth noting, and it's got a good character art too. But it's worth noting for the Wheezing deck potentially later on, because we will have access to that with Twin Energy in Rebel Clash, so it's potentially good, probably not, because Elm is, like, you know, not very strong when you can't play it going first, but still, 60 HP, 1 retreat, could be a thing. Then we get to the EVs. Unfortunately, deck's not very good, and I couldn't make it good either. Like I've tried a bunch of stuff with this, and it just hasn't happened. But the long story short is that for 1 energy, this very dejected looking EV lets you search your deck for any number of EV and EVGX and put them onto the bench. So you want to go second ideally and get 5 EVs down on the bench. The EVGX, if you don't remember, lets you evolve from hand to, you know, once per turn. Can't break the evolution rules, but it does let you evolve into anything from the EV line, which is pretty good because we have support for the EVGX evolutions. Vaporeon, they're all like a once per effect thing. You can only get 1 of these, you can't like stack them. But Vaporeon lets you have plus 60 HP on your EVGX evolutions. The Jolteon lets you pay 1 less colorless to attack with them. And the Flareon gives them plus 30 damage. So the idea is that you use Follow My Tail, get all the EVs into play, and then next turn you just evolve through all of them and use probably Jolteon GX to attack. I tried Jolteon and Flareon in the deck because Flareon has a bit of a higher damage output. Unfortunately, the deck is just bad, so yeah. It was a fun deck, but it really wasn't a super successful type of thing. Sneasel's worth noting because it's a water Pokemon here, but agility is kind of neat too. Sometimes you will just buy a turn by using this. If you're only running 1 type of Sneasel, you choose between this one or the one that's got Sneaky Smash to discard an opponent's energy if you go second. But I think this one is generally better because the agility effect is something that can just buy a turn. Gallade is kind of neat. I think Sai's probably going to try and play this one this time. It wasn't too unsuccessful when we've seen it before. It's a 160 HP Psychic type that, whilst the ability is active, is also Fighting type. And its Power Cyclone for 2 colorless energy does 120 and shifts an energy from this Pokemon to the bench. The cool thing about this is that being a fighting type, it hits like Pikarom for weakness and as well as the Lopunny Jigglypuff. So there's a couple of good things it hits there. The Psychic type is really good because it hits Mewtwo and Mew for weakness, and the fact that it's a fighting type means that it can get Diancie power to one-shot the Mewtwo and Mew. The Psychic typing means that Spell Tag is pretty good with it, and the energy recycling effect of this means that you can keep your energy stock quite high. Recycle energy itself is also really good for this thing because it takes only colorless energy to attack. So recycle energy, draw energy, a little bit of lightning energy so you can play Tapu Koko for just that extra tiny bit of acceleration. The deck is pretty good. The main problem is the low output against other decks, and the fact of it is kind of hard to stream stage 2s like this, but you know, every deck has got its flaw, right? Mawile, fantastic card. I showed this to Azrael and he was very happy. Unfortunately, the actual card is eclipsed by Tag Call because it does the same thing as a 1 colorless energy attack, which is really bad. Kind of noting the second attack though, because this has technically seen some play on the Mawile in Standard right now. 20 damage for a colorless energy, the opponent can't retreat next turn. It actually has seen play for a similar effect in the modern game, so I guess maybe. There's too many switching cards for me to approve of that though at the moment. But it sees play in Standard because it beats some current decks, so if you see like low switch counts in certain decks, you could tech it. Vibrava is kind of neat because if the opponent plays a supporter, then it doesn't affect this card. Not particularly great right now, but it would mean that you can't Boss's Orders it later, which is kind of fun. And it's kind of noteworthy because the Flygon, although expensive, is actually really good. 240 HP, but whilst it's active, all of your Pokemon take 30 less from attacks, so essentially this is tag team levels of HP, which is pretty good. Its attacks both cost free fighting energy, and that's where the problem starts. But for that free fighting energy, you do 120 damage. If there's a stadium in play, discard the stadium, do 120 more damage. This is a fighting type Pokemon that can do 240 damage. That's really strong. There are ways to get that up to even 300 if you are behind on prizes. So super good for the damage output here. Sonic Edge does 220 and ignores all effects on the opponent's active, so you can punch through one Keldeo with this, which is pretty good. And hopefully you can maybe like Power Plant or Great Catcher around the other ones. The fact if you can hit tag team numbers with this and also punish decks, basically all of them that play stadium cards, is pretty solid. If you're behind on prizes, you can pay 1 less for this with Karate Belt, so that's at least fun. Martial Arts Dojo at that point is also plus 40 damage, which is really good. And Diancie's in play, so you can get a ton of bonus off of this. The problem is just streaming them. Getting that energy cost is really tough, especially without experience share in the format. So, yeah, tough play in that aspect, but if we could accelerate the energy, good card. Duskull is interesting. We see a Galarian Meowth later on that has a very similar effect to this that sees play as a discard outlet. Once during your turn, you may discard 3 cards in your hand and evolve this Duskull from the deck. Problem is discarding 3 is a little bit too expensive, so it would only be used in its own deck for the most part, and that deck just isn't strong enough. Dustoir here only pays 1 energy to attack, so I guess that's kind of good, but it is a Psychic, not a colorless. Really would have liked to have seen Recycle energy used here. 60 damage, but if you use Psych Up next turn, it does 60 more. Problem is you're going to get KO'd or maybe gusted or something, and it's just really bad. Grim Marking is interesting though. It is Spell Tag on an ability, which you can stack with Spell Tag, so you can do 8 damage counters when this thing gets KO'd. Streaming it is just too hard though. Discarding 3 to get the evolution started is an awful lot. Unlike the Aegislash, this does not go back to the hand, so you can't recover it that way. You would need to like Brock's Grit or something, and then where's the draw power coming from? It's just too complicated, so yeah. I like the Kyogre Groudon. I think the Groudon is the best thing we could go with here. This would probably be your ideal starter with a Flygon deck. Attach up to 2 fighting energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon for any colorless energy. The Kyogre does the same thing but from the discard pile, so that's kind of fun for water energy obviously. And then both of them have a 130 damage attack. The Swirling Waves does sit for 2 water and a colorless, discards 1 energy. The Groudon does it for 2 fighting and 1 colorless, and doesn't get to use that attack next turn. I think, again, this is just your sort of like starter Pokemon for the Flygon deck, and it's pretty alright. I think the problem is getting the energy to the hand at that point. Like, Energy Spinner exists, but how are you doing it after that? It's just a bit weird. The Empoleon deck is a fun one to talk about. We have the Empoleon over here for 1 colorless energy, so Recycle Energy is good here. Lets you copy one of your Prevo's attacks and use it as this one. Means you don't have to play Memory Energy, and you wouldn't want to because the attacks you want to copy are free Water Energy attacks. So yeah, Piplup for that free Water does 80 damage, the highest damage a Piplup has ever done. And if the opponent is a basic, then they can't attack next turn. They can retreat out of it, unfortunately, that's the problem, but it's still a pretty annoying lock thing to have around. Prinplup lets you discard all the energy from this Pokemon and do 100 damage to one of the opponent's bench, so you can pick off stuff that's been retreating, which is quite good. And the Recycle Energy moniker goes quite well with Aquafall here as well. For 2 colorless energy, the Empoleon can just do 130 to the active, so the highest output of the archetype, and then it discards all the energy from this Pokemon. Obviously, Recycle Energy goes back to the hand regardless, so there's some pretty good stuff you can do with that. Problem is streaming it, and its damage output is probably just a little bit too low. Like, even against Charizard Brazen, they still didn't end up winning with this, so it's awkward. Fione is one of the few ways, in theory, you would be able to beat the Dullstall deck in this format. If it's on the bench, you can bottom deck it and force the opponent to switch. The catch, if they just put the second Doll down, then you just don't win anyway. So, yeah, it's ultimately a bit of a fruitless endeavor. It can be used to get Keldeo away from the active if the opponent puts that up, and you're like, okay, I can, if they only have 1, then it's like I can force you to put something else up and I can KO that instead. So that's kind of neat. It's a bit hard to search at the moment though, so you might not get to do it very often, but it's cool, so there you go. Victini is an interesting one. Heal 20 from one of your bench Pokemon once per turn. So I guess if you could retreat and then have 3 of these or something in play, it's a little bit like that Shaman, but it can't do it from the active. But it's not restricted to grass Pokemon. So I guess that's kind of fun in its own way. I don't think there's a deck that plays it, but it's worth noting anyway that it's just a heal effect is kind of neat. So yeah, and it's not a Pokemon V like the Indeedee will be next set. Emboar is worse Togekiss from the original Mysterious Treasures type era, or Great Encounters era. If you evolve into this thing during your turn, you may look at the top 8 cards of your deck and attach any energy, basic energy specifically, that you find and put them there. It's just not very good, but it's funny, and that artwork is crazy, so noting it anyway. Stoutland is a very funny one. It's got a very good character art too. Arf Bog is probably one of the best ability names of all time. When you evolve into this Pokemon, discard an energy from the opponent's active. If this thing is active and gets KO'd, discard an energy from the opponent's active. Problems. Its attack is not very good. Triple colorless, 110 damage, 30 to one of the opponent's bench. Not very good on something that can't hit for weakness. That's just not enough damage nowadays. You need 140 as kind of the minimum. Ideally 180, but that's asking too much for colorless Pokemon. And the other problem is we lost the good Herdier for this too. There was a Herdier in Guardians Rising or something, I think, where if you evolved into the Herdier from the hand, you got an item card from the discard back into your hand. We don't have that anymore, so it's not a very good line to sort of evolve through. Excadrill is pretty good. It lets you do 2 pretty solid attacks for a single energy on a 140 HP fighting type too, so that's pretty nice. For 1 fighting energy, Drill Bazooka does 120 and then discards the top 4 cards of your deck. And the 11th Hour Tackle is a pretty crazy attack. For that single fighting energy, it does 30 plus 150 if there are 3 or fewer cards left in your deck. That is the same attack that the Hippopotas had for like a fighting double colorless, but yeah, it's a really strong card. The only problem, of course, is below where Bryson Man. If that ends up coming up, then you are just hosed. So you have a really bad control matchup. But like, you one-shot Pikarom, and Pikarom is good until it rotates. So that's a fun one. And with all the fighting type stuff you can do, this can be for 0 energy. It can do 220 damage potentially, 240 if you put a Diancie on the bench, right? So like, there's a lot of stuff you can do to buff this up. It's surprisingly good. Cottony and Whimsicott both have Lost March for double colorless energy, so that deck kind of gets one final hurrah here, but it's not playable yet. We have lost access to double colorless energy, so you have to use like Welder at that point in order to get this going. But the problem with using Welder is then you conflict with a grass energy that the Jumpluff needs. However, this does hit for a really good weakness, both the Cottony and the Whimsicott. So if you have access to Twin Energy in the future and ADP is still ruined in your day, you could play this, and it wouldn't be the worst thing. Sneaky Pocket is something that's pretty fun for the Whimsicott, but it's never going to come up. Fairy Energy cost just makes it prohibitive, but if you put a card from your hand in the Lost Zone, draw 3, that could be a Pokemon that you put there, so it's kind of funny, I suppose. The Swordsbuck is good in the Dull Store not just because it can draw a card with Seasonal Blessings, but also because it has an attack that's like playable. Bounce lets you switch your switch this Pokemon with one of your benched for a Grass and a Colorless and does 60 damage. So this actually adds some lethality to the deck too, because you attack with this, do 60, switch to the Lily Pokédoll. They can't take a prize off it. If they KO it, you put this back in the active and you attack again. And yeah, so long as you don't flip like double tails off of your 2 Florges that you've got set, that's probably how many you're going to have in general. Yeah, you just get to keep doing it, and it's really annoying. Volcarona is a very fun card. I like the idea of this one, especially with the Silvally that we'll talk about at the end of the set. But it's just a little bit too difficult to set up right now. Flaming Shot for this 210 HP GX Pokemon lets you discard a fire energy from the hand and put 2 damage counters on one of the opponent's Pokemon. Pretty solid. For 2 fire and a Colorless, it does 160 and puts 2 of those fires back into the hand. And then for 1 fire energy, Massive Heatwave GX discards an energy from each of the opponent's Pokemon. Solid effect. Can actually be pretty good against the not Pikarom, well, maybe Pikarom, but can be good against ADP decks if you go first, because if they don't get to attach before you, like twice before you can Heatwave them, that's kind of fun. Realistically, this does solve the damage output of Silvally a fair bit, but the problem is that it's so hard to set enough stuff up. And there really just isn't a good way of doing it. And yeah, red and blue is an interesting card to help with the deck, but it's not enough by itself. Maybe, like, if I had more will to explore this set, I could probably build a better version of this deck that maybe does something, but ultimately I think there's too many weaknesses to it for it to matter. Reshiram and Zekrom was everybody's hyped card for this set, and it's easy to see why, in retrospect. Like, I'm not blaming anyone for thinking this card was good. I still thought this was like top 10 in the set, but not as good as ADP, that's for sure. 270 HP, it does 270 damage, that's why people thought it was great. For a fire and a lightning energy, Fable Flare Bolts discards up to 3 in combination of basic fire and lightning from your benched Pokemon, and does 90 damage for each one you discarded this way. That just reads ridiculous, right? Like, you discard free energy to do 270, which is basically the same as the Dragonite GX for the Mewtwo Mew decks, except this one doesn't have to discard from itself. That is both a good and a bad thing. The fact that it can't discard from itself is the bad part here, but that still just reads utterly ridiculous. And it gets better too for the Ends Resolve version of this deck. For 2 fire and 2 lightning energy, Crossbreak GX does 170 to one of the opponent's bench Pokemon. But if you played Ends Resolve this turn, you do another 170 to a different benched Pokemon. So KO 2 Dedennes in the same turn, do like 4 prize swing, right? Utterly ridiculous. This would have been super good if the ADP deck didn't have 280 HP. I think that's probably the big takeaway here, because the problem with this is that it doesn't KO everything it needs to in this set. And it's also really difficult to recover, because you want to play like Naganadel to get the energy back so you can keep cycling them all the time. Or, you know, like Welder is obviously really good, but then if you Welder to the active to get it to attack, you've got excess energy that you can't discard. If you Welder to the bench, you might not have enough energy in the first place on the active. And like Tapu Koko is really good here as well, Volkner is really good. All of these individual pieces are insane, but they just don't come together well enough for this thing to work out. And when it can't one-shot what is the best deck in the room, there isn't a control deck, and my god, this deck does not play well against control. Don't even try it. It's just not great. The Floette here is the card that got Flabebe banned and expanded, the Evolutionary Advantage one. If you evolve into this thing, then from the hand, you look at a random card from the opponent's hand and shuffle it back into the deck. This ended up getting broken with the Evolutionary Advantage Flabebe, specifically because you could do this on your first turn going second, so the opponent got one turn without supporter cards in the Sword and Shield era, so they couldn't get their best setup, and you rip a card out of the hand, you get to then use Scoop Up Net to pick this up, put the Flabebe back down, it's still your first turn going second, so you rip another card out, basically just strip the hand down with very little recourse. It's dumb, and that's why the thing got banned. You still play this Floette if you're going to play any in the Dullstall deck, and yeah, it's gross, but whatever. The Florges from this set also does a similar thing. If you evolve from your hand to it in the turn, you look at two random cards from the opponent's hand and put them back into the deck. So you definitely can do a full-on hand rip style thing with this and just be an absolute asshole about it. But yeah, neither of their attacks are worth noting, but that is fine. Oricorio GX sees quite a lot of play. If one of your Pokemon got KO'd last turn, you draw 3 cards. It's a hard once per turn, but that's fine. 170 HP GX, so a little bit frail. Doesn't need a GX to be KO'd though, so that's pretty good in its favor. Its attacks are not very good, so I'm not even going to really note them, but like Psychic Double Colors to do negligible amounts of damage. At least a GX attack can switch to the bench, I suppose. But its ability is good enough that it does see some play. I like the Lycanroc over here. It's not very good, but I like it anyway. It's kind of like Mightyena in the future. If the opponent's got any GX or EX Pokemon in play, this basically attacks for nothing, which is pretty good. But the problem is that Voltage Claw is not very strong. For 3 colorless energy or nothing with its ability in play, 60 damage. If the opponent's got special energy attached, 130 instead. Special energy are still not that prevalent. They are available, but they're not prevalent enough where this is going to matter. And yeah, if you can't even KO Pikarom without the like stipulations that might not even be in play, what are you doing, right? Beware is kind of fun. If you have this on the bench, your active Pokemon pays 2 less to retreat. It's going to get eclipsed by Air Balloon in the next set, but like it's a fun effect to have at the very least. I don't think this has seen play since the base set era though, with the Dodrio that we had there, which is a shame. And I think a lot of that is because that Dodrio itself also had 0 retreat, so it helped out a lot. Although even at that, it wasn't played initially, it's in retrospect that it's really good. I don't know. Silvally is a good card in this set, which we have over here. The type Null, I initially had this in here. This is a mistake, to be honest. I had this in here because I thought it was the only 110 HP type Null we had. That is incorrect, but I will still note it anyway because it has Air Slash, which is something that the one prize Silvally has too. So if you want to play Flying EMZ so that you can use a different Z move compared to your situational Silvally GX, you might still play this one anyway. The 100 HP one though, it's got 1 retreat, so I think that one's better. Silvally GX is the spiritual successor to Octillery, or it's basically Bibarel nowadays. 210 HP GX Pokemon, hit and miss on that one, we can speak about that in a sec. If you have this in play once per turn, soft once per turn, draw up to 5 cards in hand. Its attack does 50 for 2 colors, but it does 120 if you played a supporter card that turn. So red and blue into this and you can immediately swing with it. And for that same attack cost, Silver Knight GX will KO automatically the opponent's Ultra Beast. Sublimation GX. That was a really good attack too. Ultra Beast stuff is still playable for sure. There's a fantastic Ultra Beast tag team we'll talk about at the end of this. So this effect can still come up. 120 damage is very low, but that was the idea behind the Volcarona stuff here, because you can ping with the Volcarona effect and just go from there, do extra damage with that. It's pretty alright. But yeah, 120 is a really bad number to hit at the moment. Mallow and Lana can just heal all of that off. It doesn't really kill anything significant, which is a problem. And yeah, the GX stuff is great because you can search it, but then bad because it gives up 2 prizes. Very hit and miss. Yeah, we haven't had a lot of success with this card yet, and maybe it's just a bit of a trap in this set. But, I don't know, like, it reads really well, and I guess it's just another one of those. There's a lot of cards like that in this set, aren't there? Where it's just like, reads well, doesn't end up as well in practice. Mimikyu! This is the one that's got the character art, and that's a shame because it's not the good one. It's still okay though. Impersonation lets you discard a supporter from your hand and use the effect of that as the effect of this attack if you have 1 colorless energy on it, which is pretty good. You do still have to fulfill conditions if you are using stuff like Erica's Hospitality or Morty, but that's okay. For a Psychic Energy, this chooses 2 of the opponent's Pokemon and puts 2 damage counters on each of them. Works okay with Spell Tag. I tried to build a Roxy style deck with this where you could discard the Coughings and Wheezings and get a bunch of damage spread with that alongside this. There's still the Fairy type Tapu Lele in format, so with Rainbow Energy you can use its attack to rearrange all the counters. And like, it's cool because Spell Tag is pretty good with it too, but it just doesn't do enough damage fast enough, which is a shame. The Mimikyu that's actually good, I guess, kind of works with it though. It's an interesting dynamic here. The good thing about this one is its ability. Pokemon GX that have any damage counters on them do not have abilities. So you can use this to shut off, say, a Keldeo if you need to, or more importantly, you can put a damage counter on Mewtwo and Mew, and then it can't actually do any of its attacks. This is the sole reason why Stealthy Hood actually saw play in this era, because Stealthy Hood can block this. That's pretty much all you need to know. Dramper is a very important one-of for the ADP Keldeo deck. It has Dragon Arcana for 3 colorless energy, 70 damage, but if you have 2 or more different types of basic energy on this thing too, 70 more damage. The reason this is so important is because if you get the Water Metal on this thing, you do 140 plus the 30 with Alter Creation, and that's exactly the 170 that you need to take a free prize KO on the opponent's Keldeo. And it's not a GX either, so they can't, like, Choice Helmet get around it. So, yeah, that's the main reason. But it's a pretty good reason, to be fair. 170 damage is an awful lot if you're using this in ADP. You can use it in other decks as well, obviously. Like, even Malamar, if you're playing, like, Ultra Necrozma, could use this. That's kind of fun. So, yeah. Solgaleo Lunala is another Malamar card. It's pretty good. I think it did see some play. 270 HP Psychic type, with a Psychic weakness, unfortunately. But then again, if you're playing like Jirachi or something, maybe that's fine. Its 1 main attack is Cosmic Burn. 3 Psychic Energy, 1 colorless, 230 damage. Can't use it next turn. That's okay. It's in a Malamar deck. It doesn't discard the energy. That's the important reason why it's, like, decent. And it's only got a 2 retreat, so you can get out quite easily as well. For 2 Psychic and 1 colorless energy, Light of the Protector GX does 200 damage. But if you did play Lily's Full Force that turn, it also agilities the entire board. Puts during this turn. Yeah, if you play Lily's Full Force during this turn, prevent all effective attacks, including damage done to each of your Pokemon during the opponent's next turn. So, fantastic, to be honest, just be able to full blank everything. Yeah, unfortunately Lily's Full Force is not very good, but there is a version of Malamar you could build with it if you so chose. Buzzwole is the main thing that Beastite is supposed to pair with, I guess. Its Beast Boost does the same thing, but twice as strong. This Pokemon's attacks do 20 more damage to the opponent's active for each prize that you have taken. The problem is its attack is not very good. For 1 Grass and the Colorless, it does 60 and heals 30 from itself. Like, good versus Keldeo, bad versus everyone else. And there's some very gaping holes in the typings of the Beast Box engine. No Fairy type, for example, to hit ADP. No Water type to hit Reshizard. So, yeah, kind of awkward, to be honest. Guzzlord is a really good Ultra Beast that you could probably pair with something like Beastite or even Beastbringer if you wanted to do some fun stuff with that. 150 HP single prizer. That alone is worth noting because it's heckin' strong. Survives a lot of like single prize or like even the weekend attacks in the format. There's a like Choice Helmet makes it survive a lot of the tag team hits too, which is pretty great. For 1 Dark Energy, Mountain Munch discards a top card of the opponent's deck. Fine, I guess. Red Banquet for 2 dark and 2 colorless, amps you very much. 120 damage, and if the opponent's Pokemon is KO'd by damage from this attack, take an extra prize card. On a single prizer, by the way. This is one of the reasons why the Dark Box deck is actually like worth experimenting with, because this card is insane. Like, I played 3 of this with the Ultra Beast version of the deck, and that really worked out, so yeah. This card is another reason to use that part of that version of the Dark Box deck, to be honest. Naganadel Guzzlord is a very dumb card that does a lot of dumb stuff in this format. It's a 280 HP Dragon type, so once again, this 280 HP mark that we're seeing to beat Reshiram. Violent Appetite once per turn lets you discard any Pokemon from your hand and heal 60 from this Pokemon. Kind of neat, I suppose. It might save you from a KO. Psychic Dark Colorless to do 180 damage with Jet Pierce is pretty respectable. That's an overshot 2-kill, like an overkill 2-shot on most stuff, which is pretty good. So even if the opponent heals a little bit, you can still catch a lot of things, which is nice. And Chaotic Order for a single colorless energy. The GX attack turns all of your prizes face up, which is not particularly good. I mean, Town Map was played sometimes, but still. However, if you have the energy to pay for Jet Pierce, you also take 2 of those prize cards after you turn them face up. So usually this is to win the game, so that part doesn't matter that it's afterwards. But you can also use this early if you want to just be able to like set up better. The dumb deck we are going to see with this one is with Mismagius. This was attempted with the Pheromosa Buzzwole before, but this is just so much better with Naganadel. This is a Mysterious Treasure searchable guy, that's mostly why. You get to use 2 Mismagius, they knock themselves out, you draw until you got 7 in hand, so you keep cycling a bunch through the deck. Duststone lets you search them out turn 1, and then you put the opponent to 4 prizes by doing 2 of them, which means Beast Ring is active to get this thing to attack, and from there you just kind of use the remaining Mismagius pieces to go ahead and heal this thing when you need to as well. It's very annoying, to be honest. Super strong, super quick deck too. Pressure is super high with it, so yeah. Ultra Necrozma is only being noted because this was one of the worst cards you could have possibly printed with the expanded format in mind. It does nothing in standard because its ability is impossible to block right now, and its ability prevents it from attacking unless the opponent is down to 2 or fewer prizes remaining. Which, yeah, nullifies its usefulness entirely in standard. It's only 110 HP, which is also quite bad for standard stuff at the moment. But its attack is ridiculous if you can use it. For a Psychic and a Metal Energy, Luster of Downfall does 170 damage and discards an energy from the opponent's active Pokemon. You could still technically use this in standard as a one-of in like Ultra Necrozma GX decks, but I wouldn't recommend it. However, in expanded, there are 2 major factors that make this ridiculous. 1, Double Dragon Energy. Lets you pay for this for 1 energy. 2, abilities on basic Pokemon are stupid easy to block. Alola Muck can do it, Silent Lab can do it, obviously Garbodor can do it as well if you put a tool card on it, so you've got generic ability lock at that point. It is ridiculously easy to get this thing to attack without going down on prizes. And 170 is a lot of damage to go with, so this card is stupid. But it's not stupid for standard, so we aren't going to see it. Marshadow and Blacephalon here are the final 2 cards to note, and they are both very good Malamar cards. Marshadow lets you copy one of the opponent's non-GX attacks on their active Pokemon for a Psychic and a Double Colorless, basically Metronome, which is a really solid thing to have around. Unlike the Mimikyu that we have that can do this, it does not require the opponent to have attacked with that move in the previous turn. So yeah, it's a bit more expensive, and technically it's less sturdy, like 60 versus 70, but that might actually work in its favor if you want to use Elm's Lecture and Malamar for some reason. Yeah, it just copies stuff, and it obviously will copy the Pokemon V stuff coming out as well, which is really good. Blacephalon puts 4 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon however you want for a Psychic and a Colorless energy, but if the opponent is on exactly 3 prize cards remaining, it puts 12 damage counters down instead. Busted effect. I mean, we see this on Sableye nowadays, right? As they put 10 damage counters thing down. Oh, 12 damage counters for 10 cards in the Lost Zone. And yeah, Sableye has been good for absolutely ages. I think it was only Jirachi like coming up that stopped it from being reasonable. This is also an Ultra Beast though, so if you play this in Beast Box in particular, you could Lusamine Prism on the turn that the opponent's on their free pricing, and get this effect twice basically. And at that point, you've essentially done Cross Divide, which is ridiculous. Being able to place the counters any way you want is obviously really good. Being able to place them via, on a Psychic Pokemon is great for the spell tag stuff in Malamar decks. And yeah, if you can get 12 damage counters off, that's basically like half of a Cross Divide on a single prizer. So, and then you can Cross Divide and make it even worse. So yeah, damage counter spreading is also not stopped by Mew. So that's something else to keep in mind as well. And that is it. Very, very big set, obviously a ton to speak on here, even if some of it isn't particularly good. As I've said before, these sets are only getting more intricate and like longer to sort of talk over. So, well, hopefully you've made it to the end of this. If you have, thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it. Just going to very briefly look at the character art stuff again over here, just whilst we're at that, because honestly, some of them are really, really cool. Like the Weavile, even if it's not a good card, it's a really good character art there. The Piplup, if we see it, is an excellent one as well. Gallade's one I particularly enjoy as well. The Pikachu we will see because I'm playing this deck 100%. There's a pretty good Wishy-Washy one here as well that's kind of fun. There's the Mimikyu. I wish it was the better one, but still, this is a fun artwork to have around. The Clay Escadrille one is kind of neat too. And Jasmine's one, she doesn't seem too confident with that. I don't know. He's just like embarrassed, I think is the thing with it. And then yeah, even just a really awesome one with the coughing over here too. It's a shame we don't get to see this one too often. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time, when we actually get into 2 rounds of this one, I'm pretty sure we don't have the mental energy to play a 3rd round of this thing. Not enough decks that I want to play anyway. So yeah, 2 rounds of this one, and then we move on to Sword and Shield. So till then, take care.